I felt like no discussion of energy would be complete without talking about renewables. For years, we were told that wind and solar and hydro just aren't viable in Kentucky, and I think that story is changing. So I invited Kenya Stump with the Energy and Environment Cabinet to come and tell us about what's going on with renewables. Kenya is the Assistant Director for Renewable Energy in the Energy and Environment Cabinet. And before that position, she managed the Environmental Assistance Program within the Department for Environmental Protection. She's also served as Environmental Scientist and Policy Advisor for the Director's Office at the Division of Air Quality. She has a master's degree in environmental science from Indiana University and a master's in public administration from UK. And so Kenya is going to tell us about renewable energy developments in Kentucky.
Still morning. Good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning.
That's not rhetorical. Good. I'm so excited to be here. This presentation has been about a year in the making in that my only exposure to KGS has really been through Brandon Nuttall. Brandon, where are you? Brandon comes to our office at least once a week, and I periodically write articles on renewable energy potential in Kentucky. And as I'm having my morning coffee, Brandon kind of walks in, he pokes his head in, and he says, "Are you busy?" And if you know Brandon, then usually by the time we get done having a discussion on renewable, I'm usually on my third cup of coffee by then. But it's been invaluable having Brandon here and using his expertise, and I look forward to working with more KGS on renewable energy issues, especially in the areas. I'm a chemist by training, but don't really call me a chemist. There are aspects where I think KGS could be an asset to us as we look at renewable energy in Kentucky. So Brandon suggested I go through kind of the status of renewable energy in Kentucky and then look at the potential of renewable energy in Kentucky. So our current status is we're about 4% of our net electricity generation in Kentucky comes from renewable energy. The most of that is our hydroelectric resources. And I do love our hydroelectric resources. One from, we have a long history. People think, oh, we have a long history in coal, which we do, and I come from Muhlenberg County, and I'm very proud of that as well. But we also have a long history with hydroelectricity in the state. We have some beautiful hydroelectric facilities, and I'll talk about those here in a minute. But we are seeing growth in what we call distributed generation sources. We have about 20 megawatts of those statewide. So when you think of distributed sources, you think of those on your roof, those on a school, those that are not centralized utility generating sources. And that picture down there in the bottom is Richardsville Elementary. Some are surprised that Kentucky is the home of the first net zero school, net zero electricity school, and energy school in the nation, not just in Kentucky, but in the nation. And that's Richardsville Elementary, and you can see their solar array down there. And we are seeing strong growth in geothermal being used in our residential and commercial sectors. And of course, wood and solar are showing strong growth rates as well. So here are our hydroelectric facilities. Some aren't aware that we have this many. I'm from Western Kentucky, so I'm very familiar with Kentucky and Berkeley. I was just down at E.W. Brown there at Dix Dam. It's a beautiful facility. And that's an interesting campus if you get a chance to go tour E.W. Brown in Mercer County. You get to see Dix Dam, gas and coal generation, and now you get to see solar generation there. So it's a very diverse facility. You can see a lot of energy production technologies at work at that facility. And that solar array being built by KU down there at E.W. Brown is 10 megawatts, and it will be the largest array in Kentucky. And just to give you an example of size, it usually takes about 5 acres per megawatt. So we're looking at about 50 acres for 10 megawatts. Another one that I love is our only distributed, what I call distributed generation. And does anybody use Weisenberger flour? Yes, Weisenberger, we drive by at Midway. Weisenberger Mill has a 50 kilowatt hydroelectric facility that they use for their operations in Kentucky. So we have everything from utility scale to small Weisenberger facility at 50 kilowatts. So here are our, yeah, Rick.
You might mention that Dick's Dam has been here since 1925.
Yep, 1925. So Dick's Dam, I would encourage you to go visit if you can as a group. It's one of our oldest generating facilities, and it's just beautiful. So here are distributed renewable energy resources. A lot of people say, well, Kentucky doesn't have renewable energy, and then I show this map and say, well, we do have it. It's spread out across the state. We do have a few pockets where we're not seeing any right now. To account for the growth in Western Kentucky, that's our Tennessee Valley Authority service area, TVA, and TVA has been offering and is offering incentive programs that grow their solar resources. That's why you see that hot spot down there in Warren County and in Western Kentucky. Of our interconnected renewables, and when I say interconnected, that means they're connected to the grid. We don't really have data on what we call off-grid renewables. So these are connected to the grid. The majority is solar. We have one biomass, Purdue Farms down in Cromwell. They use their chicken waste to generate biogas, and then they have about a 1 megawatt generator that they run off of that. Weisenberger, you see there at our 50 kilowatts of hydro, and then we also have about 8 distributed wind systems in the state, very small, and those are about 56 kilowatts total. You can thank Aaron Patrick. I didn't ask him to use this, but he made this for me. This is Kentucky residential energy demand growth rates, and this alludes to the fact that we are seeing, as far as just growth rates, solar, wood, and geothermal are growing as far as how our residential community are using energy resources for heating and cooling. That said, if you look at what is being used the most and not growth rate, geothermal only accounts for maybe 1% of our total residential energy usage. So it's a very small percentage, but it's growing, and it's second to solar. Someone affectionately called me the princess of landfill gas one time. I didn't quite know how to take that, but I'll take it. The queen is actually Melissa Howell. She runs the Kentucky Clean Fuels Association, but I can handle being princess of gas, I guess. Landfill gas. I do love landfill gas because I love the fact that it creates some great synergies. We're using our waste and we're using our landfills as a resource for energy production. It becomes even better when you think that, well, we could put solar on top of a landfill that's producing gas, and you have 2 energy sources right there at your landfill. Most of our landfill gas projects are by East Kentucky Power Cooperative. They have 6 landfill gas to energy projects. Toyota last year was our first private landfill gas project, where they are supplying electricity from the Scott County landfill to Toyota. We have the city of Glasgow as well that 2 years ago started their landfill gas project as well. And the dot over there at the far near Ashland is Big Run Landfill. And last I talked with them, they were looking at cleaning up that gas and putting it into the pipeline. Here's some private biomass, biogas examples. Mac Farms in Campbellsville, they do anaerobic digestion to produce biogas. Purdue Farms, that's a great project. It's interesting to go in the summer when it's really cranking and the microbes are producing. They have an anaerobic pond. It smells very unique, so be prepared. But they have a great anaerobic pond, and they basically put a bubble over their pond. And in the summer, when it's really cranking, that bubble is kind of alive and it kind of floats and you can kind of see it. And then basically they siphon off the gas from their digester and they run it through I believe it's a GE Jenbacher engine. And then they're powering their facility and selling that to TVA. Ohio County is sort of the hotbed when it comes to biogas, because down the road from them is Young Manufacturing. I had the pleasure of working with Mr. Young. They have a cogeneration facility where they will use their wood waste there. They've been doing that since 1986. I said, well, why did you want to do this? And he said, well, I had fuel, I use electricity, it just made sense, and I just like to take care of myself. So that was his mentality there. Cox Interior in Campbellsville, and then we have Domtar up in Hallsville. So these are just a few examples of some of our biogas projects. So potential. Brandon said, we like maps and we like to talk about potential. So I said, let me see what I can dig up for you. But first, I asked myself, what kind of potential when it comes to renewable energy? Because inevitably in the news, you'll see articles about we can replace all of our energy with renewable energy, or we have this much potential, or why aren't we tapping into it? So I'm going to look at resource potential, technical potential, and a little bit of economic potential. But I think anytime we see potential in terms of renewable energy, it's important to say, well, what kind of potential are you talking about? So resource potential. I put PV up here because the number one question I get is, solar just doesn't work here. And instead of, I don't keep this in my back pocket. I probably should have like little cards made. But it technically, yes, it does work. And I usually say, are you going to argue with the state song? I mean, the sun shines bright on my old Kentucky house. I mean, that's all we need to say right there, sing the song. But it may not exactly be as bright as other states. So we have we're classified as a moderate resource potential. You know, this is pretty intuitive, this map. It's better in the Southwest, but we have sun and solar does work here. That's sort of a big hurdle in my messaging to some other people in the state. Wind, if it's not solar, it's ma'am. One, they're happy someone answers the phone when they call, and then they say, ma'am, it's really windy where I live. And I say, I'm sure it is. But it may not be windy enough for a wind turbine. So this kind of gives you an idea of why the Midwest has our greatest wind potential. That's where we're seeing most of our utility scale wind generation. Kentucky has some isolated spots. This is at an 80-meter hub height. This is sort of the minimum for utility scale wind. We are seeing new resource maps come out as wind turbine technology advances at 110 meters and 140 meters. So this is an area where as wind turbine technology advances, we've heard a lot about technology advancements and how it kind of changes the resource potential today. This is an area where we are seeing advances in the wind turbine design and how they're utilized. And if you would like those maps, I can send those to you as well. But for most people, we start at 80 meters, and we do have a few spots. Now, interesting enough, that puts us, well, we're at about the brown.
Here you go.
So the brown, we're about, 6 meters per second. For a utility scale turbine, the cut-in speed is around 4.5 meters per second. That means just to get that thing going to generate electricity. And most, we're around there. So At 6, you're not even at sort of the speed necessary to get the turbine up to its potential generating capacity. So it's important when you look at wind is we do have, in some spots, a moderate resource, but you're not utilizing your turbine to its potential at these levels, which is why you see you really need them up in here to get the maximum amount of efficiency out of your turbine. Biomass, East Kentucky, we see biomass resources, and then of course in the western part of the state, which is more agricultural based, we have biomass potential as well. But again, we have some, but not compared to where we see other areas of the country. Methane generation, this includes landfills, dairy farms, other methane generators, and we see we do actually get a few hotspots for methane generation. Most of that is, I come back to landfills, most people are surprised. The EPA operates what we call a landfill methane outreach program. They kind of look and screen our landfills and say which ones are good candidates for landfill gas to energy projects. And this kind of shows you, of our existing landfills, we have a significant number that are capable of future landfill gas to energy projects, which is what I tend to focus on. I just like landfills. I came from DEP, I like landfills. And then next to that is hydro. We have great water resources in the state, hence our history with hydroelectricity. But DOE and others did a study of non-powered dams. So we have a number of non-powered dams in the state. And they looked at potential. And you can see, that would have been interesting. We have significant resources available to us along Ohio and then along the Kentucky and some along the green where we can develop some hydro resource potential. And this is maybe an area where you all have more expertise. This is enhanced geothermal potential. We do have a few areas of the state that are rated at about a class 4 for enhanced geothermal, and I'm probably going to tap you all later on, maybe at lunch, to just get into some nitty gritty of this when we see some technical potential numbers. Technical potentials. Again, most of these maps are done by the National Renewable Energy Lab. This one is a GIS-based technical resource study that they did of renewable energy potential across the United States. And it overlays solar. Again, you can see we have a moderate resource, concentrating solar thermal. You add in wind, we're still not really changing colors yet. Biomass, we start to see some influence of biomass. Geothermal, they give us with some geothermal potential. And then really hydropower really starts changing the landscape when we look at potential in Kentucky. Obviously, we're not coastal wave or tidal. And then another important piece to this is transmission lines. So we do have good transmission access. What you will see in a lot of the literature and a lot of activity today is the Midwest area where we saw a lot of that wind potential. How are we going to get that wind to areas that want it? And that means more transmission projects. In total, they estimate theoretical technical potential of 155,000 gigawatts, 11,000 gigawatts of onshore wind, 38 gigawatts of conventional geothermal, 4,000 of enhanced geothermal, 68 gigawatts of water power, and that would be more applicable to Kentucky, and then biopower, 62 gigawatts. But it doesn't really make a difference. You can have technical potential if it doesn't make economic sense. We saw that in the last presentation where you can have potential, but it may not make economic sense. So NREL went a step further and said, well, what is the economic potential? And I think this is important to point out that, especially when we hear renewables can replace all of our electricity generation, or we can go 100% renewables. This is just one case in Rowan. In 2013, our total electricity generation was 4,100 terawatt hours. In this one case, they estimated that of all our renewable resources available, the economic potential was somewhere around 1,500 to 2,000 terawatt hours. Could the economics change and that increase? Possibly, but it's also not exactly a one-for-one trade-off when we look at baseload generation versus our renewable energy generation at utility scale. But it's not all gloom and doom. We have some great opportunities, but we have some challenges here as well. We're seeing a lot of different drivers other than actually economics for renewable energy. We have a lot of our corporate citizens that are looking at corporate sustainability goals and customer expectations, shareholders where they're saying we just want to have more diverse generation mix at our facility for our customers and for our shareholders. Our military. When E.W. Brown gets completed, it will be the largest array in the state. Currently, the largest operating is at Fort Knox, and that's Fort Knox's array at the bottom. Most people, I showed this to my husband, and he goes, "That is not in Kentucky." And I said, "Yes, it is." And he goes, "No way." And I said, "Yes, it's over at Fort Knox. They have 2 megawatts at Fort Knox. And Fort Campbell, by September, they'll have 5 megawatts, and it will be our first solar project on top of their landfill. So they chose to utilize their landfill at Fort Campbell to put 5 megawatts of solar. Their main driver is energy security, energy independence. They're saying we need to be as diverse as we can at our military installations to help increase our energy security. Economic reasons, and then also we some that are saying, well, energy prices are going to rise. We want to hedge against that and have our own generation. But the realities are renewables are still expensive. Right now, as you're well aware, and Aaron mentioned, natural gas combined cycle. This is the unsubsidized levelized cost of energy from Lazard. Natural gas combined cycle is the cheapest. When we look at what's comparing to that, and it's wind, and it's really Midwest wind. But in Kentucky, the cheapest way that you can deal with that is energy efficiency. That's our cheapest resource. So investing in energy efficiency. Beyond that, when you look at utility scale PV, you're really just saying it's competing with maybe some natural gas peakers. So our utility scale solar could be used as substitutes for natural gas peaking plants. And then we have capacity factors. This is our other challenge that we have. Capacity factor is the percent of the resources potential or a technology's potential for it to generate, and what fraction of that potential does it actually generate. Nuclear has our highest capacity factor. Again, natural gas combined cycle is up there, coal, but our renewables really struggle from a capacity factor standpoint. We are seeing more research into how do we extend and increase the capacity factors of our renewables through design and efficiency improvements. And in Kentucky, our capacity factor, just like our resource, we only get probably maybe in good places, close to 20% of the capacity of a solar facility, because, well, the sun doesn't shine at night, or at least it doesn't at my house. So, so that's where we struggle with some of our renewables on capacity factor. This is, from a renewable standpoint, I'll show you why this can be an opportunity, is Aaron has a lot more data on this, but our retail price of electricity is increasing. And what does that mean? When you look at what we call net metered capacity, and that's really a surrogate for kind of distributed solar. When you look at distributed solar versus the price of electricity, most states will track with high prices of electricity tends to mean that you're going to see more distributed solar installed, because the electricity they generate is cheaper than what they buy from the utility. That is not the case in Kentucky right today. It's close in some areas, but overall it's just not the case. Here's where we are. This came from the Solar Electric Power Association and now the Smart Electric Power Alliance. If we get to an installed price for solar of $2 per watt, that's valued at 10 cents. What do you pay at your house now for electricity?
8.
You pay 8. Yeah, I'm at 9. Anybody? Okay, so we're about 8 or 9. Residential solar is not at $2. In Kentucky, you're probably at $3.50, $3. So that's valued at, what, 16, 17 cents. You might get down to like below 15. So basically, the value of solar electricity at your house is more than what you're paying now. Now, we do have some areas of Kentucky where that's starting to equalize. And we call that grid parity. So when the value of your solar electricity meets that of what you're buying from your utility, then it can make more economic sense. We do see declining sales of electricity, and that means we're becoming more efficient. And it also means we've had some losses of some large electricity users. What does that mean for us in terms of renewables? Is we have flat or declining demand for our electricity. We know technical potential, that's sort of here a lot of gigawatt hours compared to what we have now. Economic potential, we only have 5,000 to 25,000 gigawatt hours. This is in 2015. The question is as we replace generation, or will we replace our generating sources, what will those be replaced with? Most likely at the utility scale, that will be natural gas, as long as natural gas prices remain low. I really don't see a lot of potential for utility scale renewable generation. Where I do see the potential is our utilities putting in renewable generation to meet customer demands and distributed generation. We are seeing stronger growth in customers just wanting more renewables on the grid. They want them at their facility. So I don't see a lot of one-to-one here replacement, especially with gas, but from a consumer standpoint, and our utilities moving to meet consumer demands. That's my contact information. I would like to pick your brain on just how they got that number. Because let's look here. I was a bit surprised when I found this, and that behind rural utility scale PV, which I just said with minor declining demand, I really don't see us moving there. But then second to that, we have EGS geothermal that NREL estimated as our next highest technical potential. So I have a room full of geologists. You can come school me at lunch on just what's up with that. I'll take any questions, and thanks for having me.
questions for Kenya? Excellent presentation.
Do you know the average cost for one of these 8-figure wind turbines?
You're in the millions. But again, utility scale wind out in the Midwest is one of our most cost competitive renewable resources. The issue we have is the transmission capabilities to bring that wind here. I really do like renewables regardless of what I just said.
In Kentucky, a biomass project, what do they look like? What are people doing? I don't know anything about it. I was just curious.
Well, a great example is gun manufacturing. Usually biomass projects are those where we have a manufacturer that has a readily supply of waste product that they have on site, so therefore they don't have to truck in a fuel, which would make the project uneconomical. So most of our biomass projects are manufacturers that have a waste stream on site and that have wanted, for whatever reasons, to generate electricity on site to meet their energy demands. Those are wood manufacturers, and then, Purdue, that's biogas, organic waste.
Thank you.
Let me have it where you didn't.
No, you just mentioned Domtar. I've always thought it was really interesting what they do with the black liquor. Can you explain?
They make electricity from it. Actually, Aaron's still here. I didn't get a chance to go to Domtar. I don't believe Aaron's been to Domtar, but yes, it's the black liquor from their paper milling process, and they use that as a fuel for their cogeneration, and then they sell that through.
What kind of volumes of gas are produced in conjunction with landfills? What kind of rates?
It depends, and it depends on the quality of what's in the landfill. So, I've got a whole separate landfill gas presentation, that's if you want a whole thing just on landfill gas, but it really is dependent on what material has been placed in there, and that gauges the quality and the type of gas and the quantity that comes off of that landfill.
Okay, thank you, Kenya.